a games-based approach to coaching has grown increasingly popular over the last 10 or 15 years. We've moved away from, have you got any drills, any new ideas on drills for me, to different types of games suited to specific styles of play we're trying to develop. The majority of coaching workshops now are looking at different types of games or new ideas of games you can play, or presentations around what can be got from games, increases in fitness, more touches on the ball, more decisions, and how skills can be developed. Any amount of resources out there now, from Colin Nally, Philip Kerr, the Lavin brothers, the list goes on across sports. And if you think about it, most players go up to the pitch wanting to play a match, whether that be an actual match or in training. And that goes across all ages. But sometimes we end up playing games that may not actually making the players better, or really having enough of a focus to try and improve them at what they're trying to do. And while sometimes, while not specifically getting better, they may just be deriving some form of enjoyment from it. But in the worst case scenario, they can leave players frustrated, bored, or just not enjoying training. This video is going to look at 5 of the most common mistakes made when utilising a games-based approach, and how you can stop them from happening in your trainings so your players get better, don't get bored, and will ultimately improve your overall coaching sessions. And if you want a lot of guidance around games-based coaching, you get the games-based conditioning guide in the description below, which look at a few different ideas around games, playing numbers, work rest recovery times, more mistakes you can avoid, and digs into some of the research behind a games-based approach across hurling, football, camogie and LGFA. The first mistake we're going to look at is requiring too many passes either to count as a score or to have put together before you're allowed to score. So I'll work off an example. You can see here, I've seen this set up so many times, little 6v6, maybe a 4v4 grid, taking up less than a quarter of the pitch, and players are required, usually you have to get 3 passes in a row to count as a score, and you try and put together a series of 3 passes in a row. Sometimes this is elevated up as much as 4 or as 5. You might get 4 passes in a row, it's turned over, no score. The opposition team tries to get the same. To follow on of that, and we'll see why that orange player in a second is important, is that you have to get 3 passes before you're allowed to score. So once you've linked those 3 passes together, then you can try and hit the ball over the bar, into the goal, whatever it is based on where you're set up on the pitch. And I saw this happen in real time once. A player got 2 passes, was in that position there where the orange player is, went to hit the ball over the bar, and of course, no, you've only gotten 2. So then they had to hit the ball right back into that congested area. But realistically, that player, based on the pitch, is in a really good position to put the ball over the bar. It's exactly what you want them doing in 99% of cases in matches, hitting it over like that. So that's why I really don't like the let's try and put a number of passes together, because the key is to have possession with purpose, not just a series of possessions together. There may be cases, sometimes in football, where you're trying to hold possession, but to build other forms of attack or to let another team retreat so you can work towards the end of the half and then build your attack. But ultimately, possession is only useful if we're using it to get scores. It's like same in soccer. Possession doesn't really matter unless you're creating overloads in specific places to then build your attack from. A better option, I've done a few videos on this before, you can check them out, is to use, for example here, this is a typical murder ball size one. Again, it's 6v6, we've dipped in our keepers, we've a goal at each end. You're probably still going to end up with very, very similar intensity, number of passes to be made. They're largely going to be short-based passes on a pitch this size, but you're working towards a goal. You're trying to build an attack, you're trying to evade defenders, but in a more systematic direction-based play, instead of we work at this corner, then we turn around and work it back to the opposite corner, which realistically isn't overly useful in trying to develop in some players. The one time I have seen it somewhat useful is you're working with a team who've been very much exposed to drills-based training and haven't done much games-based work, bar just playing the typical match at the end of training. We go out, here's our backs, mark our forwards, and let's just play. And some of the defenders in particular are used to just getting the ball and clearing it. Ultimately, clearing isn't really a thing anymore. I was trying to keep possession, get it to players in better positions. So the odd time, a little bit of possession for possession's sake, just to get some players used to looking up and finding someone so that they can't really clear a ball. It makes no sense whatsoever to that. Can be a bit of use there. If you find some players just find that really difficult, that's where you can dip in floaters. So you might have like a 3v3, but an extra 2 players with either team on the outside. When they get the ball, when a team gets the ball and gives it to a floater, that floater has to give it back to the team that gave them the initial pass. Second mistake is just playing games for too long. When we let games go on too long, and too long means something different based on the number of players in your field and the size of pitch you're playing on, but we just have such a drop in intensity that either the overall output physically from players becomes way too low or the quality of our passing goes down too much. Now, there can be an argument here that we want to get used to executing skills under fatigue, and I get that, but I think that should be the focus of the majority of our training sessions, just the odd time to get used of it. We're much better off accumulating far more quality repetitions within games when we're fresh, or at least close to fresh, as opposed to constantly trying to do stuff under fatigue. I was on Daily Sports Science podcast a couple of months ago, and we just discussed different opinions around how long we should play different games for. And realistically, I'll probably never do anything close to full length or even 30 minutes in a training session, because all our practice matches, all our league matches, they're all going to give us 60 full minutes of game time broken into 230s, or sometimes your practice matches 320s. The majority of everything else I'll do will be much shorter than that. It's much better to accumulate time broken into blocks at an intensity and hopefully a quality above what we normally do come championship time, so that we're far more physically and cognitively prepared to perform at that level. A few general guidelines, and we'll just break our games into small, medium and large here. So say small-sided games might be 3v3 up to 6v6. I'm never really going to play those for longer than 2 minutes, and oftentimes it'll be between 60 seconds and 90 seconds with similar time in recovery. And that might be if two teams playing, you have two teams off and they just swap in and out. You have two teams playing, one out, and you just do a little bit of a rotation there. But ultimately, I'd rather build a number of reps of high quality at 60 seconds or 90 seconds and do 6 or 8 of those, as opposed to trying to play for 4 minutes and halfway through your game, players are wrecked. The quality of passing, the quality of pretty much everything is just down way too low to really be getting a benefit from it. For our medium-sided games, this might be a half-pitch thing, a derivative of backs and forwards, a quarter-pitch game, whatever, or some of the breakout games, 7v7, maybe up as far as 11v11. I'm never really going past 6 minutes here, but again, I might look to build a number of repetitions, 3, 4, potentially even 5 games of this to get yourself up to around 25 minutes total work. This will be way above the intensity of a normal game, just because there's less players on the pitch, they're going to be in contact with the ball far more often, they're going to have way more game involvements, but it also means they'll have way less recovery time because there's less time with the ball spent at the opposite end of the pitch, where you're essentially recovering and not doing a huge pile, albeit you're quite switched on mentally. Even then, for our large-sided games, where we're talking 12v12 up to 15-on-15, we might have to adapt a couple of rules, bring the sidelines in, shorten the pitch slightly, have shorter or longer transitions after puckouts based on what it is you want to work on. I'd rather build up to 3 quality sets of 10 minutes as opposed to playing 2x25 and all just being a little bit lower in the intensity than I'd like. Potentially go 4x8 minutes, really push the pace on those, give decent recovery between games, a good feedback question, we'll touch on this more, but you get far more out of a high quality 32 minutes than trying to play 50 or 60 with quality, intensity and just physical output dropping the whole way through. If you've access to GPS here, your meters per minute are probably going to be one of the big things you're looking at. That's our closest measure to game speed we can get. If you've access to heart rate monitors, you can see what zone or what range heart rates are in and looking to keep that ever so slightly above what they would be in a typical game, or just get the players to RPE it, and you want it to be the same as, if not slightly above, for those shorter bouts, what they'd get in a normal match. Third mistake is trying to improve too many things at once in the games we're playing. Realistically, the game does include everything. If we go and play a full-side game, it has the physical, the technical, the tactical and the psychological. But it's very difficult to improve all 4 areas and the various subcomponents within them at the same time. And it's worth considering a few things after each game-based session that while we might look at the overall and think a lot of things are happening or developing, we do need to wonder, we might be getting fitter, but are we just getting tired? We might be getting more skillful, or we're just handling the ball a lot. We might be getting better at scoring, or we might just be taking more shots. We might be getting better at delivery to the inside players, or we might be just hitting more ball in the direction of the forwards. It's really important that all games have a main primary focus, and sometimes they'll have a secondary focus too. We'll look at a couple of examples of that here. So say for example, our main goal is to work on faster transitions when we get a ball in defence and work it up to attack. You can see the 3 purple players there. They're going to work as transition players. They're going to work on the ball up the field as quick as they can. They can be floaters or added in, or you can get them to work straight from defence as you wish yourself. So their main aim, oranges turn the ball over, give it to the purple, and they work it back up the field as quickly as possible. That's our primary focus, quick transitions. But it also means we're going to have a secondary focus of good turnovers or tackles in that area of highlighted in red and white. And these should, as much as possible, be tied to each other. That's a Gaelic football example. We look at one in hurling now. So in hurling, say we want to improve our long puck out options. So we're trying to deliver a ball from the goalie to that zone there where the red arrow is pointing to. We want the players to get in around that, decide who your main player is going up and trying to win clean possession. But a secondary focus, based on the first focus of trying to work on quality long ball delivery from puck outs, is being better at winning breaks, but timing runs in on top of breaks. So if we have, say, one of our blue players makes a call that they're going up, the other blue players around them that come in want to be looking at how can I time this run in there, how can I get better at getting on breaks, whether to go from distance, work through, whatever it might be. That's a secondary focus that realistically ties in with our primary focus of the long puck out. When it comes to design sessions, our primary focus and potentially secondary focus are the most important things when we're putting together the game or the overall session. The other big contributors will be how many players we have available in that particular section, but also where it falls in the stage of the week based on how tired or physically ready players are based on the previous game, the previous session, or what's coming up, the next session, the next game, the next weekend, whatever it might be. We should also be basing the majority of our instruction, our feedback, and our question around those main outcomes. We'll touch on this a little bit more in the last mistake, but it's really important that we focus everything around those two main outcomes. That might mean adapting a few other rules to allow space to grow, say, for those main objectives to develop a bit, or stop other potential rules or limitations in players' ability to allow them to fully develop. So for example, we might give much longer resets or recoveries after a score or after a wide or after an attack breaks down to allow players enough recovery time to get back into position and get physical readiness high enough so that they can attack the breaks with purpose and intent each time, because that's the main thing we want to develop in that session. But also when it comes to our transition games, we might want to underload our defences a little bit, so when we do transition quickly up the field, we're getting a quality ball to a score, so there's a degree of success after each one of the quick transitions, so players get a little bit more bought into it, they can see where it's going, as opposed to transition really quickly, being turned over because the defence are really strong. Whereas if we underload those, it increases the chances of being successful. Mistake number 4 is not complementing your games-based approach with your physical approach or your specific isolated running. The hurling or football coach and the S&C might sometimes plan out what they're doing in isolation or not in conjunction with each other. So for example, the S&C might plan out a 4 to 6 week block of the different runs they might be doing. Start off more aerobic and develop more high intensity running, or vice versa. It might start off a little bit faster and look to extend the amount of running they're going to do. The hurling or football coach might start off with more micro based stuff, some technical work in 1v1 situations, how to win a ball, then progress that onto how to give a ball out to someone and transition up the field. Or vice versa, might start off with more macro stuff and work it down to small 2v2, 3v3 situations after starting in 12v12s. Either way, the types of games the sports coach might be focused on to develop principles of play might end up loading the players in the same physical way as what the S&C has planned out in terms of conditioning. That might mean if you're doing some transition games, a lot of high speed running, and the S&C is doing a lot of tempo runs, that's a huge amount of high intensity running that can really overload a lot of the players' hamstrings. In another example, if the hurling or football coach is doing a lot of smaller sided stuff, working on breaks, working on getting passes away in smaller areas, a lot of 3v3s or 5v5s, and the S&C is looking at doing a lot of change of direction work, smaller base work, shorter base sprint stuff, that can really overload the knees, the hips, and just have far more of a neuromuscular load on the players. Ideally, they both want to sit down together, have a look at what types of games am I doing, here's some runs that will complement that. If you're a lot of medium-sided games with some longer running in it, they might either do some more aerobic runs that won't have as much of a neuromuscular or a physical load, or they might do some shorter work to dip in a few twists and turns. On the flip side, if the sports coach is doing more small tackle-based work in their games, then the SC might do some more longer, like I said, tempo runs. I've done a full video on this if you want to check it out. It'll be linked in the description below. But it is important that what's done in the games and what's done in the runs complement each other, and you don't overload the players in any one way because it can just be too hard to recover from. And you can also look at how you can balance stuff out across the week. So you might do more turning-based stuff in one session in the games and longer-based runs, and flip that over in the other night you're training. Where possible, try to get the S&C and the sports coach to plan these out together, or at least send across, and not just like on a session by session basis, what are you doing tonight, what am I doing tonight. Try and look at that over the course of a 4 to 6 week block, so you know you're building in the majority of things across the physical, technical, tactical over a longer period of time. If you can't sit down and fully plan things out together, at least send across to each other 1 or 2 main objectives so they have a good idea of what's to come and they can plan accordingly around that. If you're the sole coach and you're bringing it all along together, then just look to complement what you're doing in games against what you're doing in the isolated run. Number 5, and probably the biggest, is having a reactive feedback or analysis of the games you're doing in training. This is tied back to number 3 and potentially trying to improve too much at once, but also slightly linked to number 2 and having breaks that are too long alongside the games that may go on too long. So we want the majority of our feedback, instruction, or questions to be based around core objectives of the session. That means sometimes other things might go wrong. Sometimes you just have to ignore those a little bit to make sure you're fully focused in around the objective. So for example, if we're trying to get better working a ball to a specific scoring zone, and that scoring zone will be different based on the sport you're playing, the team you're working with, whatever it might be, that's our main objective for that session. Other things may go wrong. Some players may drop balls, there may be some fouls, there might be some wayward shooting when we've got to that scoring zone, and there may just be elements of fatigue or attitude that detract from what it is you're trying to develop. Now these can take our focus away from the main thing, but we need to be mindful of not addressing all of them in isolation constantly because it can take too much from developing our focus in that session. This can lead to our feedback just being a little bit all over the place, but also breaks in between the games that we're playing just going on way too long. Leads to a drop in heart rate, drops in intensity, and maybe concentration on the core objective moving away from where we want it to be. If you're giving feedback around too many things, what messages will actually stick? Ultimately, there's probably 3 things that will stick with players at a maximum in between all those games. So if you're talking about drop balls and fouling and wayward shooting before ever you get to what we're doing in transitioning the ball to that scoring zone, it can be really hard for all of them to be taken on board and be acted upon in the next game when you go out. You also need to keep in mind that there are a few things that might specifically take away from you meeting the objective of your session. Number 1 being, are the players capable physically and technically to do what it is you want them to do in the games? And sometimes if their passing levels aren't up to it, you might need to scale that back a little bit, reduce the number of defenders so they have a little bit more success, put less time limits potentially on how long you want to transition the ball up there, or redefine where the scoring zone is to give them just slightly greater chance of success based on their current levels of ability. If it is fatigue or fitness that's stopping them, maybe have a shorter transition area that they need to, or just shorten their pitch down, or just give longer breaks. If they do work it there, get a shot away, give a way longer reset instead of the typical 2 or 3 seconds, maybe extend that out to 10 seconds so they're fully recovered, so the opposition have a bit longer to recover from when they're working it back up. And if there's a lot of wayward shooting or players are constantly missing shots, then you might need to redefine where the scoring zone is or clarify to some players exactly, because some players might think, oh, that's our scoring zone and it's anything inside the 45, whereas realistically for some players, it could actually be quite close to goal where you want them getting shots away from. Therefore, ball should be worked there beforehand instead of taking shots from way further out. Ultimately, there are a few things that can take away from making our games-based sessions as successful as possible. Sometimes they're completely outside of our control. A big wind, terrible weather, player readiness, other things going on outside that make you move trend at the last minute, having less of the pitch available than you want. These are all things outside of our control that we just try and adapt as much as possible. But if we're very clear on the objectives of our session, particularly the primary and secondary, we ensure they are the focus around our instruction, our question and our feedback, then we're way more likely to have success in that session and carry it on to the next one and build those sessions on top of each other for better technical, tactical and physical outcomes. If you found this useful, reminder, you get the games-based conditioning guide below and you get another video up here.